I'm Noah Brown, a 27-year-old office worker. I can live like a normal person now, but I was very poor growing up. To give you a sense of how impoverished we were, we rarely ate dinner at home. My mother worked till midnight and went to work early in the morning, yet life was still difficult. As a result, she was unable to make dinner due to a lack of both time and money. My mother worked so hard because of the debt that my father had incurred. My father fled, leaving my mother as his sole guarantor. My mother raised me on her own while repaying the debt. That is why I respect my mother. I liked her cooking the best, even if it was only in the morning. Even though I was always hungry. I ate lunch at school. But in the evening, even if I could smell the lovely aromas flowing from other people's homes, I couldn't eat anything. It was hard, so after school, I would wander around town to distract myself. One day, when I was walking alone as usual, for some reason, I saw someone wandering around with a lunchbox. Because she was dressed in a school uniform, I figured she was a high school student. She had long black hair and a mole under her left eye. Even as a child, I felt she was lovely, and when I glanced at her, there was a trash can in front of a convenience store, and she was about to throw away the contents of her lunchbox. "Hey, are you going to throw it away?" I was so surprised that I called out at her. She looked at me as if she was embarrassed at me for suddenly talking to her. "Why do you care? I'm full." "I see. It's just that it looks delicious." "It's not good at all. Even if I'm hungry, I don't want to eat this." "I'm very hungry. I wish I could eat it." "Then, do you want it?" "Seriously?" I quickly replied, and she took me to a nearby park. There, I sat down on a bench, and she opened the lunchbox in front of me. "It looks delicious, thank you." The lunchbox contents were all delicious foods I'd never tried before. I was so happy that I ate it right up. "Gosh, you eat so fast? Were you that hungry?" "Yeah, I usually eat only twice a day." "What? How come?" When I told her the reason, she was very surprised. We parted ways that day, but I ran into her again the next day in front of the same convenience store. She was wandering around with her lunchbox in her hand again. I rushed up to her, but this time she wasn't trying to toss it away. "I was about to throw it away again, but then I remembered you and was looking for you. Do you want to eat it again?" "Sure, yes." "What's your name?" "Noah Brown. I'm in the 4th grade. What's your name?" "My name is Safir. I'm a senior in high school. Nice to meet you." I would meet Safir at the park every day after that, and she would share her meal with me. Being able to eat a full supper was a joy I would not swap for anything. After about a week of living like this, the contents of the lunchbox changed. "You know, you said the other day that you like sweet omelets? It's here." "No way, yes!" "Also, you said you don't like carrots. However, if you chop them into small pieces like this and garnish them with mayonnaise, they taste nice. Try it." "Seriously? You were right. It's delicious." Sophia's meal was so good that I even liked carrots, which I had never liked before. At first, her lunchbox contained random stuff. But once I communicated my preferences and dislikes, my preferences were mirrored, and the lunchbox was filled with different colors. It quickly became my favorite meal of the day. It wasn't different from my mother's cooking. I wonder what's inside. This could be because lunchboxes provided a unique sensation of excitement. Sophia was dressed in the uniform of a well-known school for wealthy girls in the city. Her demeanor was refined, and she appeared to be from a different world than mine. Why would such a person be so kind to me? Why did Sophia have food she didn't want in the first place? Looking back, it was an odd story. But I was afraid that if I offended Sophia, I wouldn't be allowed to eat them anymore. So at the time, I ate them without asking anything. However, such happy days did not last long. When spring came, "Today will be the last day I'm sharing meals with you. I can't come here anymore. I'm sorry." That's what Sophia said. I didn't know why she despaired at the time, but now I realize that she probably left her hometown to go to college. It was the last time I ate my lunch, which is solely my favorite items. I wondered if I was returning to the days when I couldn't eat supper. But before Sophia vanished, she told me about a local government-run child support community center. I went there every day since they serve free food to children. Although I was no longer hungry, saying goodbye to Sophia was difficult. I'll never forget Sophia's generosity in sharing a dinner with me, a stranger. These early experiences made me acutely aware that food is essential for life. There is no greater symbol of riches and happiness than the ability to eat delicious cuisine. With this in mind, I studied hard after entering junior high school in order to work in the culinary industry. As a result, I was able to secure a position with a prominent restaurant consulting firm. I was confident that I could assist my mother from that point on. When I got my first paycheck, I treated my mother to a lavish 3-course French lunch. Since joining the company, I found that the world is full of wonderful meals. The fact that wealth provides so many culinary options impressed me. But my mother's cooking and Sophia's lunch were still the best foods for me. That was the one constant, no matter how many delicious foods I ate. 5 years after joining the company, at the age of 27, I was given my first big job. I was supposed to provide consultancy services for a new dining establishment that would include creative cuisines and open soon. The targets were office workers. The restaurants offered a wide variety of menus from Western to Japanese cuisine. A to-go service was also planned. That way, people would come to buy lunch due to the location of the restaurant. We put a lot of effort into the interior design and advertising, but the food was the most important aspect. I had many meetings with the owner, but perhaps because of the high level of skill required, it was difficult to find a main chef for the restaurant. For market research, I walked around the neighborhood eating at restaurants. One restaurant caught my attention. Although it is a small shop, there were no disappointments and all of the lunchboxes were great. I had to investigate a lot of restaurants, but I found myself going to this lunchbox store all the time. Even though there were no new menu options, I constantly wanted to return. I wondered who was cooking this kind of food. The only person in the store was an unfriendly elderly owner. The actual cook was said to be in the kitchen in the back. When I glanced into the kitchen, I noticed someone wearing a pink apron, but I couldn't see her face. I was on my way back to work one day when I bought a lunchbox as usual. Then, I heard angry voices coming from the alley behind the store. I looked and saw the owner of the lunch store yelling at someone.
"Jesus Christ, you can quit anytime you want."
The owner snarled at another person and went back to the store. I casually looked at the woman and saw that she was wearing a pink apron. Wait a minute, is she the cook? Oh, hold on a second. I was taken aback, but I kept walking towards her. It was Sophia, the girl who gave me food when I was in elementary school. It had been more than 15 years since then, so my memory was vague. But as soon as our eyes met, I remembered her clearly. She appeared fatigued, but her gorgeous face and the mole beneath her left eye remained the same. "Sophia!" "Huh? Do we know each other?"
"It's me, Noah Brown. Don't you remember me? When I was in elementary school, you shared your lunch with me at the park."
"No way! Are you Noah?" Sophia remembered me too. I was so happy to see her again by chance that I invited her to dinner that night. I took her to an Italian restaurant where I had been hired to advise with my senior colleague. As soon as we entered the restaurant, "I'll leave," Sophia said so.
How come? This is a very good restaurant.
I can tell that just by looking at it. And it looks expensive. Honestly, I don't have any money.
Don't worry about it. It's on me.
I had planned to pay everything from the start, so I dragged Sophia back to the restaurant. After entering the private room, I ordered the most popular menus and drinks one after another. Noah, you've changed a lot, huh? I guess our roles have flipped. She looked at me as I finished ordering and said so shyly. Sophia was dressed in a torn cardigan and pants. Her hair was not well groomed. Her clothing was always impeccable when she was in high school. But that girl was nowhere to be seen now. I wondered what had happened during the period I couldn't see her. Then, perhaps sensing the awkward silence, Sophia started explaining to me what had happened up to that day. Have you heard of John Miller Corporation, Noah?
Of course. It's a big company, famous in our hometown, isn't it?
It's actually my father's company. My name is Sophia Miller.
Excuse me?
Sophia was the daughter of the CEO. I was taken aback. But then it all made sense. That is why she attended a well-known private school for wealthy girls. And that's why she was always dressed nicely. Sophia lived a wealthy life that was the envy of everyone. Her family, however, did not get along. My mother passed away from illness, and my father was living with his mistress. My sister, who was 5 years older than me, was always hanging out with her friends. I just had a bad housekeeper at home with me, and I've always craved the comfort of family, Sophia said. The meal Sophia was about to throw away that day was made by the housekeeper. However, the contents were merely side dishes that Sophia detested. The housekeeper appeared to be bullying Sophia, who was going through a rebellious phase at the time. I didn't care eating in the least, and I'd rather starve to death than eat it. But just as I was going to toss it away, you came up to me with dazzling eyes, and you asked me if I was going to throw it away. When I arrived home and washed my lunchbox that day, I felt odd. Meals she believed were only to feed her stomach could have a deeper meaning. That's what Sophia thought, and she wanted to watch my face eating deliciously again. That's why she started to go to the park with me. Initially, the housekeeper prepared the lunch. Later on, however, I was the one who cooked them.
I knew it. I could tell their appearance and the taste had changed. So you were the one doing the cooking?
Yes, you were the only person who helped me feel better. I started to enjoy trying to make things to suit your taste and to eliminate your likes and dislikes. Sophia went to college to study culinary science after discovering her love of cooking. However, her father's company went bankrupt while she was still in school. Sophia dropped out of college and the family split up. Sophia continued to work hard, acquiring certifications as a chef and a nutritionist. However, when Sophia's spendthrift sister came knocking on her door to plead for money, she struck rock bottom even harder. Sophia had to pay off her older sister's debt when she went away with a guy. According to her, that's why she was forced to live in poverty. I got sick and was unable to work full-time. As a result, I now work at the lunch shop during the day and at the factory at night.
But I believe the working conditions at that store is horrible. With your skills, I'm sure you could work at another place.
I'm already 35, and it's impossible. I'm rather worried about that he will fire me. Her family saddled her with their debt, and she had to suffer the consequences. I looked down as I sympathized with her story. However, A feeling other than sympathy emerged in my heart. Sofia, despite her poverty, worked hard and looked forward to the future. My experience was similar to how she developed an interest in cuisine and worked hard. I looked straight at her and said, "You mentioned previously that our roles were reversed, correct? Then it's my turn. I will help you."
What do you mean?
Sofia was puzzled, but I was determined. I had always wanted to repay the favor someday. That was the moment. A few days later, I took Sofia to the dining bar. There, "Please hire her as your main chef." I introduced her to him. I requested Sofia to cook some dishes for the owner since he wanted her to try her hand at cooking. The owner nodded enthusiastically after tasting them. "I see. This would be fine." In cooperation with the owner, we offered Sofia enough incentives to keep her from working several jobs. And we hired Sofia. As a result, the restaurant prospered. People have been drawn to the restaurant by word of mouth, and the number of customers is growing. The most popular item was the to-go lunchbox. Sofia devised a number of new menu items to appeal to the clientele. It became famous and the media even came to interview her. I was there, too, as a consultant. When asked what made the restaurant so appealing, Sofia replied,
"It is the owners and Noah's that Constantine's attentiveness. Eventually, I like to provide to-go lunches to children of working parents."
Hearing that, I realized something. Sofia looked at me and smiled happily. Even if you are poor in material terms, you can be rich in spirit. My mother and Sofia taught me that. I'm considering inviting her to the volunteer at a children's health center. I want to keep doing everything I can to deliver wonderful meals to as many people as possible.
This year marks the 5th anniversary of my marriage. I recently had a child and am learning to cook, which is something I am not used to as a homemaker. My husband and I are getting along well, and he enjoys the food I cook every day, saying it's delicious. My daily life is free of problems, but there is one thing that bothers me: our parents. My parents have both died, so I'm talking about my husband's mother, or should I say, my mother-in-law. Since we married, I've had this feeling about my mother-in-law. I am sure my mother-in-law hates me and avoids me. Since we got married, I don't recall having many conversations with her. So I was terrified because I had no idea what she thought of me. When I thought about my mother-in-law, I felt uneasy about a variety of issues. My father-in-law had died, and my husband was concerned about my mother-in-law living alone. So he had previously discussed the possibility of us sharing the house with her. I honestly felt uneasy and disliked the idea, but she hadn't done anything wrong to me. And since I understand my husband's concern, so I was going to accept it. However, my husband later told me what his mother had told him. "I absolutely don't want to share the house with you because it's too suffocating. Now that you're married, you should spend time together as husband and wife." That's what she told him. I was relieved to hear that, but I was also disappointed because I assumed she didn't like me after all. But there was no battle between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law between us, as I frequently hear from my friends. Of course, I definitely did not want to argue with my mother-in-law. So I was relieved when there was no more talk of sharing the house. I do have occasions to interact with my mother-in-law, such as when I went to greet her for the New Year's holiday. But within 30 minutes, she said to me, "You shouldn't stay here for so long. Go home and relax." I considered myself fortunate to be able to return home early. But I also felt kind of lonely and confused. I was worried that my mother-in-law disliked me because we hadn't had a chance to talk like that. My mother-in-law is still working. And I think it's because she has a fairly straightforward personality that I got the impression she was a little scary. But my opinion and anxiety about my mother-in-law shifted one day. One day, my husband left something at my mother-in-law's house. Of all the other stuff, he left his bag containing materials for work, and I had no idea what to do. My husband is concerned about my mother-in-law who lives alone and often visits her at home alone. But because he goes there so frequently, he appears to have forgotten something. My husband says he really needs it tomorrow and that he knows the material is there because he spoke with my mother-in-law on the phone, so it's fine. But he asked me to go and get it for him because he couldn't pick it up today. I had no reason to refuse because I am a housewife, so I decided to take the child and go pick it up. Even though I was only going to get something he had forgotten, I felt it would be impolite to leave without a gift. So I was considering purchasing some pastries and giving them to her as a gift. However, because my husband was usually with me, I didn't know anything about my mother-in-law's preferences. I was at loss for what to do and texted my husband, asking him what his mother liked. I got a surprising response. "Then you can prepare something for her to eat and bring it to her." I thought it was impossible, but since I was learning to cook, and my husband's reaction was positive, I decided to bring her a meal. But I was worried about what to bring. "She doesn't have a preference, so I believe she will be content with anything." That is what my husband said to me lightheartedly. I knew I couldn't make a mistake here. I looked through various recipe books and considered, but I couldn't make up my mind. After thinking a lot, I came up with an idea. Even though I had no idea what my mother-in-law liked, if my husband liked it, perhaps she would as well. With that, I immediately took action. I made stew, fried fish, and fried rice right away. My husband enjoys all of these foods. I put the rice and the stew in a Tupperware and left to get the items my husband had forgotten. When I arrived at my mother-in-law's house, I received my husband's bag and took out the food I prepared. "You're welcome to eat them for dinner. I'm not sure if you like them." With that, I handed them over to her. She received them and said to me, "Don't you want to join me for dinner?" I was already nervous, but that unexpected offer made my heart skip a beat. "Sure." Because of the suddenness of the situation, I responded reflexively. And I responded in a stiff, strange tone. I have no idea what my mother-in-law thinks of me. What will she say to me? Maybe they'll say something about the meal's flavor. To be honest, I was so anxious. I want to go home. That was my true feeling. I wanted to flee before she said anything. But I felt it would be impolite to refuse in this situation, so I went inside. I began preparing the meal as soon as I got inside the house. I was considering what I would say if she criticized me. I served the meal I had brought to my mother-in-law on a plate. She was looking closely at the meal. While I was regretting not to bring something more appealing, she smiled with great joy. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal in decades. It looks delicious." And surprisingly, she was overjoyed. And no matter what she ate, "This is delicious." She complimented me like that. I, too, was relieved and ate with my mother-in-law. We talked about my husband's favorite foods, our children, and so on over dinner. I was able to talk with my mother-in-law about things that I didn't have a chance to chat about yet. The mother-in-law who eagerly listened to my husband's and children's stories was nothing like the image I had of her. She was a sweet person with a very gentle smile. She confessed something to me after the meal, while we were having tea. "I was thinking that nowadays, young people don't want to be friends with mother-in-law. So I avoided interacting with you, fearing that I would make you feel uncomfortable." What she said to me sounded very sad. For the first time, I discovered that my mother-in-law was extremely shy. And my mother-in-law said, "I'm glad that the first meal my daughter prepared was a home-cooked meal, and that I hadn't had in a long time." It's delicious and pleasant. Now that we're here together, it's like a dream come true. I'm overjoyed." She sobbed, her voice choking up with tears. I too began to cry as I remembered my own mother. I received a phone call from my husband while we were both in tears. He was surprised to find me in tears and sniffing when I answered the phone. "What's wrong?" He was quite surprised. "Nothing. I'm having an emotional outburst with your mother." "What are you talking about?" "Well, I hope it's not a fight or something. Don't forget to bring my bag." He then hung up the phone. When I got home, I complained to my husband about his cold response. My husband laughed and said he was sorry, but he looked happy. My relationship with my mother-in-law gradually improved after that incident. I had more opportunities to visit my mother-in-law's house, and not only my husband, but I also started taking my children to my mother-in-law's house to bring her some food. We also began to make phone calls. My mother-in-law used to call my husband's cell phone whenever she needed to reach us, but she's now calling me on the house phone. Something else happened during such a pleasant change that moved me. The other day, I was having dinner with my husband. Just to inform him, I said, "I'll see your mother again next week on Monday or Tuesday." My husband, who had began saying random things to me, began blurting out something. "I should have told you this sooner, but after you brought her first meal, my mom called me to tell me that she had eaten a home-cooked meal for the first time in decades." It turned out that she had called my husband after I had left, and he continued, "Since my father died when I was a child, she has been trying to keep her head up and raise me on her own. Mom is a strong woman, so she doesn't say it, but I think she missed me a lot when I got married. But then she ate your meal. She was relieved to discover that I had married a good person and was living happily." I listened quietly to my husband's long story. My eyes were welling up with tears. Hearing what my husband said made me truly happy. She realized that I had married the right person and told me that her hard work had finally paid off. My eyes couldn't keep the tears from streaming down my cheeks any longer, but my husband didn't seem to mind. He straightened his back and said, "Thank you for marrying me. Thank you for getting along with my mother." My husband bowed his head, sobbing. My heart was full seeing him like that I burst out crying. Except for when our child was born, I've never seen my husband cry. My husband was crying just as hard as I was. It was a minor incident with my mother-in-law, but I never expected it to have such an impact on me. We used to fight over insignificant things when we were dating. I don't think I'm a good wife in comparison to a homemaker who handles housework, childcare, and a full-time job. I am probably not as supportive of my husband as I should be. However, I realized how fortunate I was to have such a wonderful husband and mother-in-law. They made me happy too. I am filled with gratitude. I still cry just remembering the incident. My husband and I are currently discussing the possibility of sharing the house with my mother-in-law once more. I like to think of a way for us to live happily together as a family, whether we live together or not. I don't know how long I'll be with my husband and mother-in-law, but I'll never forget this feeling.